He's one of our more recent team members who's engaged very much in what we consider certainly a very important state. We have done presentations in the past on the open primary possibilities that are being worked on in Pennsylvania. And I think that Chris is keeping pretty good track of the developments there. So I'll turn it over to you, Chris, and you should take it from there.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Piros, and I'm a director of Reform Elections Now, a bipartisan organization founded by business and law school alumni who are concerned with the dysfunction in the U.S. political processes. The group really was initially inspired by a 2017 report done by business executive Catherine Gale in conjunction with a Harvard professor, Michael Porter, that argued that the U.S. election processes were a significant contributor to the political polarization that we're experiencing. Over the last few years, the group has explored various election-related issues, including gerrymandering, capital finance, campaign financing, voter access, voter processes, legislative paralysis, and disinformation. In so doing, we've established relationships with political scientists and legal scholars who work at the forefront of best election processes. Our goals are largely educational, but tempered by a sense of civic responsibility to make practical recommendations based on objective, nonpartisan evaluation of various approaches. In mid-2020, when few others were yet aware, we identified the potential for a disputed election arising from loopholes in 19th century election law. Reform Elections Now was actively involved in promoting passage of the Electoral Count Reform Act and the Presidential Transition Improvement Act just a few weeks ago. Today, our research director, Peter Cyrus, will be discussing what the results of the 2022 election tell us about the crisis in our political system. But before Peter begins, I should say that our next presentation will be on Thursday, February 23rd. The topic will be state-level initiatives. Please save the date and join us then. So I'll turn it over to Peter for the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, can you acknowledge that you're trying to get the screen sharing there? And we have to make sure Peter unmutes himself.
You have the screen share up now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the 2022 elections and what the results tell us about the crisis in our political system. Now, you may think you know about the results of the election, but you may be surprised. We will focus today on the difference between high-profile state races, where some voters seem willing to focus on the qualities of the candidate, versus lower-level races, including Congress, where voters tended to stick with one party or another. Using this methodology, we're going to look at how both parties fared, and then demonstrate that the 2022 election represented a strong negative for both parties as well as for American democracy. Now let's see how much you know about the 2022 elections. We're going to ask you some questions. So rather than what we normally do, which is take polls, since this is a complicated presentation, just figure out your answers and then we'll find out. Okay, first question, Arizona quiz. Democrats defeated election deniers in races for governor, U.S. Senate, and Secretary of State. Boy, they won overwhelmingly. In 2018, they won Congress by 1.8%, 50.9 to 49.1. How did the Democrats do in 2022? They won by 13%, 8%, 3%. Did they lose by 3%, 8%, or 13%? Figure out your answers. Okay. If you had they lost by 13%, you were right. Democrats won 43% of the vote compared to 56% for Republicans. From 2018, the Democratic percentage declined from 51 to 43. Republican votes increased 16%, Democratic votes decreased 15%. Republicans flipped 2 seats and gained a majority in the state. Now, how did Democrats do so badly in congressional elections and then still win statewide races? And the answer is Republicans nominated election deniers who lost. If you look at Kerry Lake, Brett Masters, and Mark Fincham, on an average, they lost by about 9% behind the average Republican congressional candidates, many of whom were election deniers. So what you could say in Arizona, election deniers lost, Democrats lost, Republicans won. Okay, let's look at Pennsylvania. Now, Chris knows in the governor's race, the Democrats won governor and senator. In the governor's race, Shapiro beat Mastriano 56% to 41.9%, a big victory. So what happened in the congressional races? Democrats win by 10, by 3, was it even, or did Republicans win by 6? Okay, get your answers, because the answer is, Republicans won by 6, 47 to 53. Between 2018 and 2022, the Democratic share of the vote dropped from 55 to 47. Republican votes increased 22%, Democrats declined 11%. In Pennsylvania, again, election deniers, Mastriano and Oz lost, Democrats lost, Republicans won. Can you imagine how the Republicans would have done if they didn't have Mastriano and Oz at the top of the ticket? Let's look at Georgia. Same pattern. It's clearer because the Republicans won everything except for the Senate race. But if you see very consistently, the Kemp, Raffensperger, and for Congress, Republicans were in the 52 to 53% range. For the Senate, with Herschel Walker, only 48.5%. Okay, here's the Wisconsin quiz. Biden carried Wisconsin in 2020. The Democratic governor won a good re-election campaign. The incumbent Republican Senator Johnson snuck in with 50.4% against the minority candidate. It's a pretty good state for the Democrats. In 2020, the Democrats won 53.1% of the congressional vote. How'd they do in 2022? 55, 52, 48, or 45? Now, you may be seeing a pattern here, because if you're ready, the answer is 45. Republicans gained 1 seat for 5-3 majority. And when you look at the state Senate and the state assembly, the Republicans have almost 2/3 of the seats. So if Republicans have 64% of the seats in the state legislature and in Congress, Wisconsin is not turning blue. Okay, here's the fun Florida quiz. In 2020, Biden lost Florida pretty narrowly. And the Democrats this year had high hopes with former Governor Charlie Crist as former Republican Governor Charlie Crist as their gubernatorial candidate, and Representative and former Police Chief Val Dennings as their Senate candidate. DeSantis won a landslide over Crist by more than 1.5 million votes and a margin of 59.4 to 40. With this victory, DeSantis is being hailed as a potential presidential candidate. So how did DeSantis do compared to the Republican congressional candidates? 9%, 8%, 5%, 1%, or behind? Well, it may surprise you that DeSantis ran behind the average Republican congressional candidate and only 1.7% ahead of Rubio. Now, Democrats have portrayed themselves as party friendly to Hispanics and seniors, yet in the state with large populations of both, they've been getting creamed. Between 2018 and 2022, Democratic share of the congressional vote dropped from 47.4% to 38.8%. Republicans gained 775,000 votes, while Democrats lost 407,000. And in 2018, congressional representation was Republicans 14, Democrats 10. Now it's Republicans 20, Democrats 8. And none of this is because of gerrymandering. So in Florida, it is not that Ron DeSantis is popular. It's that Democrats are increasingly unpopular. Florida is not a swing state. It's a very red state. And the same thing is true in Texas. Democrats keep talking about how Texas is turning blue and complain about gerrymandering, but the numbers tell a different story. Beto O'Rourke was a strong candidate. He got killed by Greg Abbott. In the elections for Congress, Republicans actually polled ahead of Abbott 56.5 to 42.5. That's a big margin. And this is the third consecutive election in which the Democratic share of the vote has dropped. Republicans won 23 seats, Democrats 13. So Texas is not turning blue. Maybe Democrats are singing in blues, but it's not turning blue. Sorry, wrong. Now, this is a tough one. We are projecting the next red state. In 2016, the Democratic senator from this state received 71% of the vote. This year, 57%. Look at the Democratic percentages in congressional elections in the last 3 elections: 68-2, 63-7, 55-7. And between these between 2018 and 22, Republican votes increased 27%, while Democratic votes declined 25%. What is this state? New York, New Jersey, Illinois, or Oregon? You got your answers?
Maybe we should ask them to unmute on that one.
Okay, anybody got an answer? Well,
New York.
you're correct. It is New York. Schumer, the majority leader, went from 70.6% to 56.8% of the vote. Now, we're going to give you extra credit if you can name his opponent. The fact that you never heard of Joe Pinion, who ran closer to Schumer than Dennings did to Rubio, should frighten the bejesus out of the Democrats. Hochul won the gubernatorial election with only 52.8. And look at what's happened in Congress. The Democrats went from 21 to 6 to 15 to 11. That's pretty scary. At the current rate, we are projecting New York will turn red in one of the next 2 elections. Okay. We're gonna ask for answers at the end of this slide. In 2018, Democrats won 235 congressional seats. In 2022, they won 213. Not a gigantic difference. In 2018, they won 53.4% of the popular vote. Well, I got 53.4 in there twice. In 2022, they won 47.8. Further, by our analysis, 2022 was the first election in the past 12 years in which gerrymandering appeared to benefit Democrats. In the previous 6 elections, Democrats won more votes per seat than Republicans. In this election, Republicans won more votes per seat than the Democrats. So in other words, we're suggesting that gerrymandering may have benefited Democrats in 2022. Okay. Between 2018 and 2022, the percentage of votes by party was largely unchanged in 6 of the 50 states. So in how many of the remaining 44 states did Republicans gain share? Now, there are 5 answers there: 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40. So out of the 44 states, how many did Republicans gain? Anybody want to yell out an answer?
16, B.
32.
40.
Okay. Okay, and the answer on the old gold scoreboard is 40. Republicans gained share in 40 states, Democrats in 4, 6 were even. Now, we're nonpartisan here. I'm just saying, if you watched on election night, the Democrats were celebrating, the Republicans were glum. If I had told you that Republicans gained share in 40 states and Democrats only in 4, you would have thought you were watching the wrong TV network. Okay, one last thing and then we'll get on. In 2022, there were 22 states in which the losing party received less than 3/8 of the vote. 16 were Republican, only 6 were Democrats. These are states that we consider to be landslide states. Now, these states have 96 Republican electoral votes compared to 35 for Democrats, and theoretically, 10 extra states should give the Republicans a 20-vote edge in the Senate. And in the southern states of Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, West Virginia, Kentucky, and South Carolina, Democratic votes for Congress dropped from 39% to 30% in the last 2 off-year elections. Now, what's interesting is several of those states, like Kentucky and Louisiana, have Democratic governors. Several have Democratic senators. Something's going wrong here for the Democrats. Since I mentioned South Carolina, I just want everybody to note that South Carolina is going to have the first Democratic primary this year. Now, in South Carolina, Democrats received only 32% of the vote. Their share in the last 4 years has gone from 44.4% to 32%. They didn't even field candidates in 2 of the 7 House districts. So why have Democrats selected South Carolina for the first primary? Well, the answer is political payback, because that was what got Biden in. But I don't think payback is good for the country, and I certainly don't think it's good for the Democrats. But we'll move on. Just wanted to highlight before we get off the election that there were 3 outlier states, and we should try to understand why they were outliers. In most states, as you can see from the numbers in Georgia, or for the amount that people like Kerry Lake and these people trailed the average Republican, the splits were relatively consistent, even with the worst people like Mastriano, only 12%. But in 3 states, you had huge swings. Democrats in Vermont won the Senate and House with landslides, 68.5% and 63%. Yet a Republican won the governorship with even a bigger margin, 71%. And the same pattern followed in New Hampshire. In Alaska, which tried this ranked choice voting, Democrats received only 10% of the vote for Senate and 22% of the vote for governor, but won the congressional election. So one of the things we want to understand is why, when everybody else is so partisan, why these states were able to be nonpartisan. Okay, so let's just review the 2022 election. In the election, most people voted against candidates, not in favor of candidates. Democrats voted against Trump, election deniers, and abortion rulings. Republicans voted against Democrats, stolen election, crime, inflation, and immigration, not irrigation. Independents voted against whomever they disliked the most. If people are voting against instead of in favor, something is wrong. In fact, there is only one thing that we can find on which Democrats and Republicans agree. The United States is moving in the wrong direction. Now, when we look at the election results and the post-election polls, it appears that most Americans believe our country is threatened, our country is moving in the wrong direction, the economy is bad, Congress is terrible, neither party can be trusted, neither governs in an honest and ethical way, and neither respects our democratic institutions and traditions. In other words, something is seriously wrong with our democracy. So let's take a look at some of these numbers. Americans are dissatisfied. Almost 3/4 of Americans are dissatisfied with the direction of the country, and including a majority of both parties. Democracy is threatened. 68% of Americans and a majority of both parties think democracy is threatened. That's not just, election deniers. That's a majority of both parties. 76% think the nation's economy is not good or poor. The 63% think the country is moving in the wrong direction. Now, understand, this is not about Biden, Trump, COVID, inflation, or abortion. For more than a decade, through both Democratic and Republican administrations, a large majority of Americans of both parties have thought the country was moving in the wrong direction. And if you look at a longer-term view, what you'll see is that under Reagan, H.W. Bush, Clinton, and G.W. Bush, there were periods when 70% of the country was moving in the right direction, or even 40 or 50. For the past 18 years, this number has only once exceeded 40%, and last year was as low as 11%. And look at Congress. I mean, Americans have an equally negative view of Congress. It doesn't matter which party controls the House, the Senate, or the presidency, or whether we have a united or divided government. Americans think Congress is doing a lousy job. And again, look at a longer term. What you'll see is in 2000, Congress, after reaching levels of 40% in the 1980s and 72% in 2001, after 9/11, approval ratings have dropped as low as 11% and have only once reached 30%. So this is not, you can't blame this on Trump or Biden or Kevin McCarthy or Nancy Pelosi. We're losing faith in our country. And Americans have a favorable, unfavorable view of both parties. They don't like the Democrats. They don't like the Republicans. 75% disapprove of Republican leaders. 62% disapprove of Democratic leaders. 77% say they're not represented in government. 72% say things are going badly. This is not good. And also, and this is to me is a disturbing number, a majority of both parties say that neither party governs in an honest and ethical way. And half of Americans think neither party respects this country's democratic institutions and traditions. Now, when you look at the two parties, voters give Republicans a slight advantage on foreign policy, crime, inflation, immigration, and give Democrats an advantage on abortion. So Republicans have a little easier time because they have more confidence on more issues. But the fact of the matter is that the country, that most people are highly dissatisfied with the way the government is working and with how we're moving. Now, as the previous charts and the election results demonstrate, Americans have lost faith in the two parties under both Republican and Democratic administrations and lost faith in their ability to turn this around. Americans are rejecting election deniers. That's a great sign for democracy, but they're losing faith in those they elected and in our election system. And the only way to fix these problems is for both parties to wise up and change directions. And perhaps more importantly, for citizens to rise up and change our political system. So let's look at what each has to do. First, what should Republicans do? That's pretty easy. Republicans have an easy path. First, stop denying the 2020 election. Trump lost. Too bad. Republicans, you did great in 22. Just forget 2020. Stop focusing on election fraud. These arguments of dead people voting, massive boxes of fake votes being lugged into counting rooms, and machines transferring hundreds of thousands of votes don't work. It's old news. Stop supporting Donald Trump. Our country has enough problems without having to live through 4 more years of the Donald. To paraphrase Oscar Brown Jr., quote, "You knew I was a snake before you brought me in." He's not helping your party. And stop nominating candidates like Herschel Walker and Mehmet Oz. Senators should actually know something about government and probably should have at least visited the states in which they are running to represent. I'm not sure that Oz or Walker was actually ever in those 2 states. Now, in addition, stop giving power to the far right wing in Congress like Green, Boebert, and Gates. I don't know if you heard McCarthy's quote today where he said about Marjorie Taylor Greene, "I will never leave that woman. I will always take care of her." I didn't know they were married. But as Speaker of the House, he maybe could focus on the country and focus on the issues in which you lead, like the economy, immigration, crime, inflation, and foreign policy. Look, Republicans, you're winning on every issue except abortion. People trust you over the Democrats on economy, inflation, crime, immigration, and foreign policy. Go for it. If you dump Trump, stop denying elections and election fraud, shut up the crazy right, and focus on all your policies that voters like, you'll win consistently. Okay, what should Democrats do? Well, that's a little more complicated. First, Democrats, stop congratulating yourself for how well you did in 2020. What you should do first is send Trump a thank you card for pushing Oz, Mastriano, Lake, Masters, Walker, and the others. Because without those election deniers, you would have been trounced and lost the Senate. Stop focusing on January 6th. You know, it's not going to change any more minds. You've gotten the mileage you can get right now. Leave this in the hands of the Attorney General and the courts. Stop focusing on documents from Mar-a-Lago. As we're finding out, everyone has documents hidden in their garage. In fact, I went into my garage today and I found 4 boxes of confidential documents. So, you know, and stop dissing deplorables. There is something that you should understand about the deplorables. They actually still have the right to vote and used to all be Democrats. So walking away from them is not going to help you. But really what Democrats have to try to do is focus on issues that are of concern to Americans: inflation, economy, crime, immigration, and foreign policy. How is it that the party that thinks it's doing all these good things for Americans can't convince voters? If you look at what Democrats have accomplished in the last couple of years, and then you look at the Republicans gaining ground in 40 states compared to 4 for the Democrats, You know the Democrats have a communication problem. And one of the things you have to do is stop passing omnibus bills no one understands. Try passing legislation that can show your party and what your party can deliver. Stop catering exclusively to your progressive wing unless you want to be a permanent, minority party. Is AOC really closer to the center than Matt Gaetz? I don't think so. And stop celebrating Kevin McCarthy's issues. A dysfunctional Republican Congress will not benefit you during a Democratic administration. Okay, so that's what the Democrats should do, and that's what the Republicans should do. But more importantly, what should we as citizens do? Hopefully the two parties will wake up and take steps to improve our government. But while we are waiting, things are getting worse. If we truly want to see the U.S. turn around, this is the time when all citizens must wake up and recognize our political system is not working. As we said earlier, you know something is wrong when 68% of Americans think our democracy is threatened. 73% are dissatisfied or angry about the direction of the company. 76% feel the economy is not good or poor. Congress's disapproval rate is twice its approval rate, and a majority of people disapprove of both parties, think neither governs in an honest and ethical way, and think neither respects our democratic institutions and traditions. Something is wrong with this political system. How do we fix it? Okay. Just before I go on tell you how to fix it, I'm just thinking of one of my favorite songs by Barrett Strom and the Beatles. The best things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I just wanted to show you this chart because I think it is symbolic of the kind of problems we have. The best things in life are free, but not elections. Someone thinks money is important because election spending has quadrupled in the past 24 years. We are not suggesting Congress can be bought. We are only suggesting that people with money think it can be bought, and they didn't get all that money by being stupid. The problem is all those representatives actually like money and find it hard to say no. And so if you look and see, in 1998, in the congressional elections, they spent $1.5 billion. And this year in the congressional elections, they spent $9 billion. I mean, what are they buying? And how do we stop them from buying it? Because we can't go and change the law. The Supreme Court said, corporations are people. And our answer is the only solution is to have more competitive elections with systems that make it more difficult for money to dominate. Okay. A focus on more competitive elections. Here's the scary number. Incumbents almost never lose. In the last two congressional elections, only 6% of incumbents who ran were defeated. This, of course, doesn't include people who died or, retired. But of the people who ran for re-election, only 6% were defeated. And in state legislatures, it was half that number, or a little more than half. 3.8% of incumbents lost. When you have a system where incumbents rarely lose, you also have a system where money can easily target the likely winners. And where you have competitive elections, money has to work harder to back a winning candidate. And where there's more turnover, money's impact is minimized. Okay, so we need competitive elections in which incumbents can lose and in which more moderate candidates can get elected. How do we get them? We can take drawing of districts out of the hands of the politicians and place it in the hands of independent commissions. These commissions actually work, but in New York, we had a Democratic Party that decided that the hell with the commissions, and they redistricted on their own, and they got caught with their hands in the cookie jar, and they lost a lot of seats. Open primaries work. There's no reason for excluding independents, often the largest voting group, from the political process. But basically, the best way to get competitive elections is to try new voting systems, whether it's ranked choice voting or top two primaries or other systems that foster the election of more moderate candidates and experiment with new voting systems. Now, there are many interesting and potentially productive ideas for new voting systems. California, Washington, Nebraska, and Louisiana have successfully used top two nonpartisan primaries. Maine has adopted ranked choice voting. Alaska, one of our outlier states, adopted top four ranked choice voting. Other states are considering top five ranked choice voting. Some other states have multi-member districts where that often elect representatives from both parties. To date, these systems appear to create more bipartisanship and more moderate candidates. But there are other ideas. For example, there's something called approval voting, in which you can vote for any candidate you like, and the candidate with the broadest approval from the largest number of voter wins. There's something called Condorcet voting, where you rank every candidate, the computer electronically pits one candidate against another, and the candidate who wins the most head-to-head elections is elected. There's pro and con voting, where every voter has two votes, one pro, one con, and the winner is the one with the highest pro-con margin. Such a system would also produce much more moderate results. There are other potential alternatives. What we have to do is start thinking about them. We are not suggesting that one is better than another. We are suggesting that unless we do something, our republic is going to be in big difficulty. Okay, now here's the good news. The good news is none of these may be the right answers. They are alternatives that may or may not open the election system to more moderate and competitive elections. But we're a republic, not a democracy. And each state can be an independent laboratory in which we can experiment with systems that might produce better results. And if we take it down to the city level, for example, in New York, which we tried ranked choice voting, other cities do as well, we have thousands of independent laboratories. We do not know if top four primaries, RCV, top 4 or 5, approval voting, Condorcet vote, pro-con voting, or any other system will work. What we do know is that the system we have has been taken over by a duopoly of two parties and is not working. If different states try different systems, we might find some that actually work. And we may even find that some states, because of their geography or population, fare better with slightly different systems. So instead of fighting the 21st century civil war over again, we might be able to create systems that work. Now, this may seem complicated and somewhat conceptual, but in reality, it is anything but that. As Chris said in the beginning, in state after state, there are specific initiatives focusing on new voting system. In addition, constitutional scholars and leading experts are focusing on new voting system that will work for the 21st century with the types of computers and calculating systems we have. So our next two systems are going to focus on that. The next one will focus on specific initiatives in states such as Nevada, Minnesota, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Missouri, and others that are gaining traction and could become models for states in the future. And then after that, we're going to have some of the top constitutional scholars in the country come and present to us their view of even other systems that they think could save our democracy. So if we are to save our country before it implodes, we need to change the way we elect representatives to give moderates instead of just the two bases of vote. Stay tuned. This is important, and this is the future of our country. So thank you.
Wow. Okay, Peter. I think you've laid out the problem and some of the potential solutions. Can we get some questions from the, I know that one of the questions that came up, which I do think you answered in a few specific instances, was about to what extent gerrymandering caused the shift in the voter distributions.
Peter, can you stop screen share?
Yeah, I probably can.
Good.
Okay, did I? Yay. You know, I'm a master of technology.
It's taking a while to get you there.
No.
Mike, I see that Jeffrey Barkdale has his hand up.
Yes, I do. Peter,
Yeah,
you think you could share your content info with me, please? Because I not only want to talk to you more about this stuff, but I also like to try and invite you to a special Zoom meeting that happens almost every Monday, not almost every Monday. What it you know that on days like non-special days like not Martin Luther King Jr. Day. If you know what I mean? 'Cause
yeah,
have you heard of Harvey Westerman?
yeah.
It's his group, and Mike Hirsch and the Progressive Democrats of America, the Green Gra- Green Grassroots election. I thought you'd be, I thought you like, I think you should probably come on and share your presentation with them.
Okay, I'm putting I will put my email in the chat.
And do you think we could share the slides? Because I think,
Well, yeah, we can share the slides after the presentation is over. We put the slides up on the website, but if you send me an email, I can send it directly
Yeah.
to you.
And just
All right.
by the way, on our website, we always include the slide presentation and a recording of a video recording of our presentations. It takes a day or two for us to get it up, but all of our presentations are on our website.
can you share the website, please, just in case?
reformelectionsnow.org.
Hold on. Reform elections. What else?
It's
Oh,
our-
thank you. Reformelectionsnow.org.
Yes.
Because one idea I have probably could actually help out the process. I don't know if it'll make it worse or make it better. I just thought maybe since you seem to be an expert in all this, Peter, I thought maybe you can help out with that. It's a new law called a new law idea I have called democracide, otherwise known as crimes against democracy.
Okay, well, just send me a note on it and I'll take a look. Okay,
Okay, but
Thank you.
I'm probably got to wait till my PowerPoint's back up and running. So you
Okay.
could, alrighty, but I
Great,
can't
thank
send you little information about it.
great.
Alrighty.
Bill Rosser has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Peter, that was great insight. I love it. Let's focus on one part of that, which is the money side and how the expense is going to be enormous and so forth. And what we can do right now, I think one approach to getting less power in the hands of the money forces is to have them fully disclose money they spend, to whom, for what purpose, whether to a candidate or to a lobbyist. And related to that, today, now in Congress, there's a proposed act called the Disclose Act. That's a step forward in the right direction. So of all the things that we can do, that's one thing we can do is try to support disclose, because that's going to have some effect. It doesn't outlaw contributions. It just says you got to be honest and tell us exactly where your money is going. I think that could be helpful.
I agree with you. And actually I think April, we have a money presentation
Great.
coming up. I got to get the lobbyists signed up because I told them that these were all rich, fancy people on this call, and that, I've got 17 drug companies signed up.
Hopefully not at the marijuana companies. There are some additional questions in the chat.
Why don't we just let people talk?
I see
Okay.
Judy Weinstein has her hand up. Judy?
Hi, yeah, I was wondering what part you think the partisan media world, like Fox News and, all the podcasts and, whatever it is, what part do they play in all of this?
I think they play a very significant part. It's when I was a kid growing up, there was, Walter Cronkite, Huntley Brinkley, there were 3 stations you watched, and they all were pretty, they all were pretty right down the middle. We actually gave a presentation on this about 6 months ago. And the problem is now people watch their bases. But, my concern, I don't know if anybody, answered any of the questions, but I will just tell you that when I looked at the numbers and saw that that Republicans gained ground in 40 states and Democrats gained ground in 4 states, even though I had spreadsheets in front of me and I was looking at the numbers every day, that number shocked the heck out of me. And, if I watched MSNBC all the time, I would never have figured that out. But the problem that we have is that people are watching more and more media that reinforces their point of view. And so the separation between the parties is getting even greater. And that's why I really think that what we have to do is focus on the election systems.
Because that will then make these media outlets less relevant?
No, it will not make the media outlets less relevant, but it will force, if you look at California, for example, let's say the election between when the current vice president ran for Senate, she ran against another Democratic woman of color, Sanchez. So it was Harris versus Sanchez. So, they could say whatever they want on Fox or the equivalent of whatever they want on MSNBC. The fact of the matter is California voters had to decide between 2 people who were in many ways similar, and the more moderate of those 2 voters, which was Harris, won. And where you have elections where you have different choices, if you had like a pro-con election, some of these things get more complicated. So it's not that the networks are going to dramatically change, it's that the alternatives are going to change.
There are some additional questions in the chat, but I would think it would work better if those people would put their hands up and then actually directly ask the question verbally, orally.
Mike, I see Susan Falk has her hand up. Susan? Unmute yourself, Susan.
Yes.
We're not going to take we're not going to take any questions. Susan, the answer is I did bring your newspaper up and put it in front of your door.
Very funny. I'd like to know how we can change the voting systems. In other words, you suggest these changes in the voting system to make it more, moderate. But how do we get those changes to happen? Doesn't the government, doesn't the Congress have to approve that?
No. And the answer is, and going back to what Chris was talking about at the beginning, really interesting things are happening with the voting systems. in Nevada, where no candidate got 50% of the vote, they passed the first step in having ranked choice voting. Now, Maine has a version, Alaska has a version, looks like Nevada's going to have a version. In other states, you're finding different initiatives on a state level to change the voting systems. And these initiatives are making great progress. I was out in Arizona and meeting with the people in Arizona who were doing this. And I can't tell you, I would say 70 or 80% of the people I talked to were highly dissatisfied with the system in Arizona. So they're all looking for alternatives. And I think that's a very helpful sign.
Yeah,
I think it
great.
needs to be emphasized that most of the election processes are determined by states, and that can be done either by state legislatures, or in about half the states, it can also be done through citizens' initiatives or referenda. So there's multiple ways to do it, but the federal government has a limited role in establishing state election law. There is a question about to what extent young people are getting engaged or can be engaged in some of this work. And I think that's certainly a fair question for our group, which tends to have a median age somewhat over 50.
I think our median age is somewhat over 92, but I don't want to single anybody out. But having said that, what you are seeing in a lot of these states is a lot of young people on the ground getting interested in these subjects. You see a lot of young people starting to realize the system is not for them. And but this takes grassroots organizing. Now you're seeing, I met with a woman in Arizona who's organizing ranked choice voting in that state. Chris has found a whole bunch of different efforts going on in Pennsylvania. You find, Dave was talking about efforts going on in Missouri. There's a lot of states, here in New York, you have ranked choice voting in the Democratic primary, or, you're starting to see things happen. And the only way to get young people involved is grassroots.
There's also quite a bit of work going on in Connecticut, originating some of it from Yale University students on ranked choice voting particularly.
Yeah.
And Allegra's working on some of that.
One point I will make is, in most cases where you have a change, there's a trigger. Like Maine had this idiot governor named LePage, and the Republicans, he got elected with 35% of the vote. The Republicans couldn't stand him, even though he was a Republican. The Democrats couldn't stand him, so they came up with ranked choice voting. In Alaska, Lisa Murkowski lost an election to a Tea Party candidate, and because they have the sore loser law, she couldn't run in the general election. So she ran as a write-in candidate, and then the Alaskans said, we need a new system. In Nevada, as I pointed out, nobody got 50%. They said, hey, this is crazy. Look at Georgia. Look at the amount of money people spent in, well, actually 42% of the Georgia economy in the past year was people coming in and spending on the election. So maybe it did help the Georgia economy. But having said that, the kind of, why couldn't you have ranked choice voting instead of runoffs in Georgia? Actually, here's a funny thing. I was talking to a former senator from Georgia and said, hey, you realize, of course, there is ranked choice voting in Georgia for overseas voters and military voters. And he said, no, there's not. And then I had to send him the law that said, yes, there was. Now, here's a guy who lost in a runoff and didn't even realize there was ranked choice voting. But where you have a problem, like the kind of problem you ran into in Georgia, or the kind of things that happened in Alaska or Maine, how did they get, for example, nonpartisan primaries in a state like California? Simple. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a Republican governor. He realized the Republicans were losing. He said, we got to do something different. So there are triggers. And what we look for are states that now have triggers because of the last couple elections that are going to be really fertile ground to try new things.
I see that Lawrence Abbott has his hand up. Unmute yourself, Lawrence.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that in California, more and more cities have ranked choice voting, including the city where I live in the East San Francisco Bay Area, San Leandro. And in California, we also have an organization called California Clean Money. And we've been working for over 10 years to enact more and more state legislation that requires disclosure of everything from campaign material to getting propositions on the ballot and disclosing, who the money is behind people collecting signatures to the ballot material that comes. And it's been helping a lot. And also on all the ads that appear on TV and radio, and now even on the internet ads. We passed that last year, where internet ads on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot have to reveal who the money is behind that. And then on the national level, I hope everybody here will support Pramila Jayapal's House Joint Resolution 48, the We the People Amendment, to overturn Citizens United. And in the chat, I put the second paragraph. It's a very simple amendment to the Constitution that would overturn Citizens United and establish that only human beings are entitled to constitutional rights, not giant corporations that have been using those powers and rights to diminish the power of the people. And then also that money in politics must be regulated to ensure that everyone has equal voice. And that's been growing steadily and gaining more and more support now. It has 95 co-sponsors, and Representative Jayapal is introducing that again now with the new Congress. So all it takes to advance that is to keep contacting your reps and tell them that you want them to be a co-sponsor in the House. And if you talk to your senators, let them know that it needs to be introduced in the Senate, and we're looking for a senator to introduce that now so that we can grow the movement to pass the We the People Amendment. Pass.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just actually have one comment on what you were saying. We had a presentation last year where we had these candidates who ran in Oakland as a team in a ranked choice voting election. And they basically ran them, and they participated in our call and basically said, look, we ran as we said, we don't care which one of you vote for first, second, or third, as long as you give all the votes. And what happened in the election was that the incumbent mayor, was a man, led through 13 rounds, and this women's coalition won in the 14th round because they campaigned together, they supported each other, and there's some really good things that happen when you work together.
Well said. Thank you.
But also point out that it's not just to encourage moderates, it's also to encourage competitiveness in elections, to have some of these other systems. It's getting the role of people who otherwise can't engage in the competition to be part of the discussion. I think we've hit the 1 hour point. We do appreciate that everyone that has stuck with this presentation. I'm not surprised that very few, in fact, none, turned it off before Peter finished. So thank you, Peter.
Not
Thank you
even my
for
wife?
attending. Yes, Peter? Did you want to say anything as a final wrap up?
No, I do want to say that I see a number of new faces here and a number of old friends, and I want to thank you all for coming and joining us. And anybody has any comments, please feel free to contact me. And as Chris said, the next presentation is really going to take a deep dive into some of the states that we think have a real significant chance of changing in the next election. And if you can get, you could pass off Maine, oh, it's, just a bunch of people in the woods, or Alaska, that's a bunch of Eskimos. But when you start seeing other states adopting new systems, we may have a real chance to change our democracy.
Thank you, Peter. And I must add, eat more fish.
Yeah, if anybody wants scallops, please email Ken. He produces the greatest scallops in the United States,
They're good
maybe
for
the
you.
world.
To Peter,
Bye, everybody.
wait, Peter,
Yes.
you sure you don't want to share your phone number with me? I'm willing to share mine.
Well, I mean, send me your phone number and, I'll call you. I sent you my email, so, I can do that offline very easily, but, I can, you have my email, send me an email and I'll send you my phone number. Okay, I do that easily.
Mike,
Okay.
I see that Gwen, did you have your hand up? No? Okay.
Incidentally, Gwen has a doctorate in politics, right, Gwen? I mean, don't mess with Gwen. She is one of the smartest people you will find. So, Gwen and I went to college together, and I'm not going to get in an argument with her.
I just shared you my number.
Okay. I'll write it down.
Mike, I think we might end this call. Thank everyone for joining us.
It's hard to tell which one, since there are two Peter Series accounts.
Don't worry. The reason it looks like there are two Peter Cyruses is that my fancy computer for some reason does not screen share. So I use one computer to screen share and one for everything else. So
Gwen's got a question. Hey, Gwen.
Bye, everyone.
Wait, Gwen,
Good
unmute yourself.
job.